Good morning. Today we are talking about roots and x-intercepts and zeros, solutions, and factored form for quadratic equations. Remember, those are x-squared equations. Now let's do some definitions real quick. Up here, zero product property, looking right here. There we go. So right here, zero product property. That means that if you're multiplying two things together with an answer that's zero, well, one of these two factors must be zero. The general form of an equation, we've seen that before because you use that when you're using the quadratic formula to solve. That is ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to y. And the factored form of the equation, is what you see down below there, where you have, forgot the a out front, times x minus r sub 1, which means a root, first root, times x minus r sub 2, which means the second root, is equal to y. You can see that there's a here and a here. Those are the same values depending on which form of the equation you're in. They always follow from the same equation to the different forms, that a is the same a. That's going to help us more tomorrow. Now when we find the zeros of the equation, then, let me focus in here, find the zeros of the equation. When you're in factored form, which this is in factored form, you have two, how do I undo that? Hold on. When you have two factors, that is two parts multiplied together equal to zero, we use the zero product property, and we can solve by setting each of these two to zero itself, like 2x plus 3 equals 0, and solve for x. And x plus 1 is equal to 0, and solve for x. If you get x by itself in each one, you get x equals -3/2 for the first little mini equation, and then you get x is equal to -1 for this second little mini equation. And there's our two solutions then. Those are the zeros of the function. If you go to graph it, these also happen to be the x-intercepts. So try graphing this equation with your graphing calculator right now. Put that into y1 and hit graph, and you will see that the two x-intercepts are at -1.5 and at -1. So what about these three factors equal to 0? Well, we do the same thing. We're going to set each one for x minus 3 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0, and x plus 1 is equal to 0. And we find by solving those that we get x is equal to 3/4, x is equal to +1, and x is equal to -1. Those are the zeros of the function, and they're the x-intercepts. Again, graph this, put that into y1, hit graph, and you'll see that these are the three x-intercepts. On the third one, we have three factors again. We have x, 5x minus 1, and x minus 2, all equal to 0. And doing the same thing, we want to say that x is equal to 0, that 5x minus 1 is equal to 0, and x minus 2 is equal to 0. That gives us solutions, or zeros, or x-intercepts. Hold on, this is moving. Where x is equal to 0, 1/5, and 2. We have three solutions again, just like you can see that there's three factors with x in it. On our last one, three factors equal to 0. How many solutions will we have? We will have three solutions for x again. What do we get? Well, set it equal to 0. I get -1/5 for x. Set it equal to 0. I get 2. Set it equal to 0. I get -2. Remember that these are also the x-intercepts for the graph. Let's move down to the next part. The next part says find the zeros and write in factored form. Well, what did I tell you up here? I told you that these zeros are also the x-intercepts. So if I can find now from my general form equations the x-intercepts or the solutions with the quadratic formula, then I can write it in factored form. Again, look up at the top. Our notes say that the factored form of the equation is right here. Here's your factored form. Here's what we're starting in, general form. Here's our factored form. If I know the roots, that's what we found right there. The x-intercepts are the roots, are the zeros. We can just plug them in to that equation. I want you to start by graphing. Get that graphing calculator back out. Let's find the zeros and write in factored form. If I find the zeros by graphing, I need to put this equation into y1 and find those x-intercepts. Sometimes you might have to calculate the zero. Remember, second trace, and we calculate the zero to do that. Sometimes we look in the table and see where y is 0. But in either case, you will find that those x-intercepts, which are the zeros, x is equal to 1/3 and 2. Also, remember that the factored form of the equation means that I need to know what the leading coefficient a is. Let's write down what the factored form is again for your reference. The factored form that you're going to use is y equals a times x minus r sub 1 times x minus r sub 2. We're going to plug in a, r sub 1, and r sub 2 into this equation. That gives me the equation y equals a is 3 times x minus 1/3 times x minus 2. That's the factored form and the zeros. Here's my zeros. It said find the zeros and write it in factored form. There's my new equation. Why don't you give the second one a try? Graph that in y1 and find those x-intercepts. Hit pause on the video. You should have found that the x-intercepts are at -3, 0, and 1/2. My a value's 2, and my 3 x-intercepts are -3, 0, and 1/2. Hit pause on the video and write that equation in factored form. You should have written that y is equal to 2 out front times, oops, hold on, Mrs. Brighting's messing up. Y is equal to 2 times x plus 3 times x minus 0 times x minus 1/2. My factored form equation, done. My x-intercepts, my zeros, done. Let's look at this last part. We want to convert from factored form into general form. So now, here's all my factors, just like up top. Here's all those factors. I need to get from factored form, this is factored form, into general form. I need to make that equation go from the opposite direction of what we did here, factored form, into here, general form. That's what it's asking me to do. That just means multiply it out. Multiply it out so that you want to take 2 of the factors and FOIL or double distribute. Take that answer, once you get it, we'll get that answer after you FOILed it, and multiply it times the 5x plus 3 that's still there. Take the last one and multiply it in to the answer you get from foiling. What's it look like to FOIL? Let's do that on the side. X minus 2 times x plus 2 means to double distribute. X goes into everything over here, and negative 2 goes into everything over here. I get a product of x squared plus 2x minus 2x minus 4. And when I collect like terms, I get x squared minus 4. X squared minus 4 is part of the next step. Again, I need to take the third factor that I didn't use yet and multiply it in. I need to multiply 5x times everything in there and 3 times everything in there. 5x times x squared. That's 5x cubed. 5x times negative 4 minus 20x. 3 times x squared plus 3x squared. And 3 times negative 4 minus 12 equals 0. Or really, this is the y. Collect like terms and you'll be all done. We want y to equal 5x cubed. I'm going to switch it around, plus 3x squared minus 20x minus 12. There were no like terms, so that's just my answer with descending order on the exponents. That's your assignment, the notes for your assignment. If you see, let me make this full size again, you'll see in the next part, you're going to do each of those 3 things that we just did in notes together, and then the answer key for both the notes that I just went through with you, and then the answer key for the worksheet. That is your Monday assignment.